When a simple act of honesty collides with bias and privilege, a young girl's integrity becomes the catalyst for an unlikely transformation. This is the story of how returning a lost wallet changed not just one life, but many, proving that character runs deeper than appearance, and misguided assumptions can cost more than money ever could. The morning sun had barely risen over the city skyline as 16-year-old Amara Johnson rushed to catch the early bus. With her backpack slung over one shoulder and a worn science textbook clutched to her chest, she slipped through the closing doors just in time. "Sorry," she mumbled to the driver, who barely acknowledged her with a nod. Amara found a seat near the back, away from the judgmental stares she often received. At 5:30 a.m., most passengers were service workers headed to their early shifts downtown. People like her mother, who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads in the increasingly gentrified neighborhood they called home. Unlike her mother, though, Amara wasn't headed to work. Not yet, anyway. First came her advanced placement study group, which met before school 3 days a week. After school would be her shift at Café Lumiere, an upscale coffee shop frequented by the city's business elite. One day, she whispered to herself, tracing equations in her notebook, "One day all this will be worth it." Amara had maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA despite working 20 hours a week. Her dream was medical school, a dream her mother supported by taking extra shifts cleaning offices at night. "Intelligence is your superpower," her mother always said. "Don't let anyone dim your light." But the world seemed determined to test that light at every turn. 10 miles across town, in the gleaming penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel, Richard Whitman was already on his third conference call of the morning. "Listen, the numbers don't lie," he snapped into his Bluetooth earpiece while adjusting his custom-tailored suit in the mirror. "Either they accept our terms by noon, or we walk. I didn't build a billion-dollar company by being sentimental." At 45, Richard had everything money could buy: the cars, the properties, the power. What he lacked, though no one dared mention it, was perspective. Having climbed from millionaire to billionaire status in the last decade, he'd gradually lost touch with the real world outside his privileged bubble. "Have my driver ready in 10, he instructed the hotel concierge over the phone. "I have meetings downtown all day, and I can't be late." Richard slipped his platinum credit cards, driver's license, and $5,000 in cash into his Italian leather wallet. The cash was for a potential real estate deal he wanted to close that afternoon. Sometimes cash spoke louder than credentials in this town. As he slid the wallet into his jacket pocket, he had no idea how significant this small leather accessory would become in the hours ahead. By 3:30 p.m., Amara had changed from her school clothes into her Café Lumiere uniform, a crisp white shirt and black pants that she'd found at the thrift store and meticulously ironed. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her name tag polished. "Remember, Amara, these customers expect perfection," her manager, Mr. Willis, reminded her for the 100th time. "And don't forget." "I know." She finished his sentence quietly. "Don't make too much eye contact, and be invisible when I'm not needed." Mr. Willis frowned, but didn't correct her. They both knew the unspoken rules of service in establishments like Café Lumiere. For the wealthy patrons, staff like Amara were meant to be efficient shadows, present when required and completely forgettable otherwise. The afternoon rush brought the usual crowd of executives, lawyers, and entrepreneurs, including Richard Whitman, who commandeered the corner table for a meeting with developers. He ordered expensive espresso, barely glancing at Amara as she served him. 3 hours later, as the cafe began to empty, Amara started her closing duties. While wiping down the table Richard had occupied, she noticed something wedged between the leather seat cushions: a wallet. Her heart raced as she opened it and saw the stack of $100 bills inside. "Mr. Willis," she called, rushing to the counter. Someone left their wallet. Her manager glanced at the expensive leather item and raised an eyebrow. "Must be nice to be so rich you don't even notice losing $5,000, he remarked after peeking inside. "Looks like it belongs to that tech guy, Whitman. His business card's in there. We should call him," Amara said immediately. Mr. Willis laughed, sliding the wallet back to her. "Why?" so he can accuse us of stealing from it? Besides, think about what that money could do for you and your mom. Didn't you say her medication isn't covered by insurance? Amara's stomach tightened. It was true. Her mother's heart condition required expensive medication that stretched their budget to breaking point. $5,000 would cover 6 months of pills with money left over for rent. For just a moment, temptation flickered in her mind. But only for a moment. I'm calling the number on his card, she said firmly. It's not ours to keep. Mr. Willis shrugged. Your choice. But don't say I didn't warn you when he doesn't even say thank you. Rich people like that. They expect honesty but never appreciate it. Richard was in the middle of dinner with investors when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He normally wouldn't have answered, but he'd been calling contractors all day and couldn't afford to miss an important call. Mr. Whitman? This is Amara Johnson from Café Lumiere. I found your wallet after you left today. Relief washed over him. He hadn't even realized it was missing yet. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said without pleasantries, ending the call abruptly. When Richard arrived back at the cafe, it was nearly closing time. He spotted a young black girl in uniform waiting by the counter, his wallet placed carefully in front of her. Something in her posture, the straight back, the dignified expression, irritated him inexplicably. Perhaps it was the interruption to his evening, or the embarrassment of having been careless with something so valuable. That's mine, he said, striding forward with his hand outstretched. Amara nodded. Yes, sir. I found it between the cushions at your table. Everything's still inside. Your cards, ID, and the cash. Instead of gratitude, suspicion flashed across Richard's face. Are you sure about that? There was a substantial amount of cash inside. Amara blinked, taken aback by his tone. Yes, sir. $5,000 in $100 bills. It's all there. Rather than take her word for it, Richard grabbed the wallet and counted the money right in front of her, his actions clearly conveying distrust. Something wrong? Asked Mr. Willis, who had been watching the exchange from nearby. Just making sure everything's accounted for, Richard replied coolly. You never know these days. Amara felt heat rise to her cheeks as other staff members and a few lingering customers watched. Are you suggesting I stole from you, sir? She asked quietly, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. Richard looked up, momentarily caught off guard by her direct question. I'm just being thorough. Business habit. She stayed an hour after her shift to wait for you, Mr. Willis pointed out, surprising Amara with his defense. And she's the one who insisted on calling you immediately after finding it. Looking uncomfortable at being challenged, Richard reached into the wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. Well, thank you for your honesty, he said, holding it out to Amara like he was doing her a tremendous favor. Amara looked at the $20, less than half of what she made in a typical shift, and then back at the man worth billions who had just counted $5,000 in front of her after implying she might be a thief. I don't want your money, Mr. Whitman, she said, gathering her backpack. I did what anyone should do, but not everyone would have counted their money in front of the person who returned it to them. She walked out with her head held high, leaving Richard holding the $20 bill, suddenly aware of the stares from around the cafe. The next morning at school, Amara tried to focus on her chemistry lab, but the encounter with Richard Whitman still stung. His assumption about her character based solely on her appearance was nothing new, of course. She'd faced similar prejudice from teachers, store security guards, and even some classmates' parents for years. Amara, could you please pay attention? Her chemistry teacher, Mr. Saunders, called out. This material will be on the exam. Sorry, Mr. Saunders. I was just thinking about the formula. Well, perhaps you should think about it while letting someone else answer for once, he replied, ignoring her raised hand and calling on Tyler Matthews instead. Tyler, who had been playing games on his phone under the desk, stumbled through an incorrect answer while Amara bit her tongue. After class, she approached her guidance counselor, Ms. Reynolds, about applying for the prestigious Summer Science Institute, a program that could significantly boost her college applications. I just think you should consider more realistic options, Ms. Reynolds suggested gently. The institute is very competitive. Perhaps the community college has summer courses that would be more appropriate. But my GPA is perfect, Amara insisted. And my science grades. It's not just about grades, Amara. These programs look for students who fit a certain profile. I'm just trying to help you avoid disappointment. Amara left the guidance office with her application forms still clutched in her hand, determined to apply anyway. But the familiar weight of lowered expectations pressed down on her shoulders. Richard Whitman couldn't focus on his morning meetings. The interaction with the young cafe employee kept replaying in his mind, making him increasingly uncomfortable with his behavior. "Sir," his assistant interrupted his thoughts. "The contract from yesterday's meeting was in your wallet, right? Legal needs it for processing." Richard reached for his wallet, pulling out the folded document that was worth millions to his company. A document that could have been lost forever if not for Amara Johnson's integrity. And he had thanked her with suspicion and a $20 bill. "Cancel my lunch," he said suddenly. "I need to make a stop downtown." At Café Lumiere, he approached Mr. Willis, who recognized him immediately. "The girl who found my wallet yesterday, Amara? When does her shift start today?" "She's not scheduled until tomorrow," Mr. Willis replied cautiously. "Is there a problem?" "No, no problem," Richard said quickly. I behaved poorly yesterday. I'd like to thank her properly." Mr. Willis studied him for a moment. "She's a good kid. Straight A student. Works here to help her mom with bills." He paused. "She's got the kind of integrity you can't buy, Mr. Whitman. Not with $20, not with 20,000. Richard nodded, feeling the sting of the justified criticism. "Tell me more about her," he said, taking a seat at the counter. "I think I misjudged her completely." As Mr. Willis shared Amara's story, her academic excellence despite financial hardships, her dream of becoming a doctor, the discrimination she regularly faced, Richard began to see the full picture of the person he had so casually disrespected. And in that moment, a plan began to form in his mind, a plan that would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Richard Whitman stared at the mock-up of his company's new healthcare app on the conference room screen, frustration evident in his clenched jaw. "This is the third redesign, and it's still not connecting with test users," he said, addressing the room of executives, all white, all male, all dressed in nearly identical suits. "We're 6 months into development, millions over budget, and our core demographic isn't responding. What's the disconnect?" James Porter, his chief marketing officer, cleared his throat. "The app is designed exactly to industry specifications. Perhaps the problem is with the test group." Richard shook his head. "The problem isn't the test group. The problem is that we're trying to create a healthcare solution for underserved communities without understanding their actual needs." He tossed his pen onto the table. "The Westbrook Foundation is sending their evaluation team next week. If we can't demonstrate actual user engagement, we lose their $50 million grant." The room fell silent. Westbrook was their biggest potential investor, and their funding would make or break the company's expansion into healthcare technology. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, knocking gently on the door frame. "Your 2 o'clock is here." Richard checked his watch. "Everyone, review the user feedback again. There's something we're missing, and we need to find it before we lose everything we've worked for." As the executives filed out, Richard thought about Amara Johnson. After learning about her academic achievements from the cafe manager, he'd made some calls. Her school principal had confirmed everything. Perfect grades despite significant financial challenges, brilliant in sciences, yet consistently overlooked for opportunities. Maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what his company needed right now. A fresh perspective from someone who actually understood the communities they were trying to serve. Amara sat nervously in the reception area of Whitman Technologies, feeling completely out of place among the sleek glass and chrome. When Mr. Willis had told her that Richard Whitman wanted to meet with her, her first instinct had been to refuse. But curiosity, and the promise of discussing a beneficial opportunity, had convinced her to at least hear him out. "Ms. Johnson," Richard greeted her, extending his hand as he entered the reception area. "Thank you for coming." Amara shook his hand cautiously. "Mr. Whitman." In his office, Richard got straight to the point. "I behaved inappropriately at the cafe. I made assumptions about you that were unfair and, frankly, prejudiced. I'd like to apologize." Amara nodded, surprised by his directness. Thank you for acknowledging that. I've also learned about your academic record and your interest in medicine, he continued. Which brings me to why I asked you here today. My company is developing a healthcare application meant to serve communities like yours, but we're failing to connect with users. I'd like to offer you a paid internship to consult on the project. Amara's eyes widened. Excuse me. 20 hours a week, flexible around your school schedule. Pay is $30 an hour, and if the project succeeds, there would be potential for a scholarship recommendation from the Westbrook Foundation. Her heart raced at the figure, more than twice what she made at the café. With that money, her mother could cut back on her night job. They could catch up on rent. And a recommendation from Westbrook could mean a full ride to college. But suspicion clouded her excitement. Why me? You have an entire company of professionals. Richard leaned forward. Because they're not connecting with the real world. They create solutions in a vacuum. You, on the other hand, understand firsthand the barriers to healthcare access in underserved communities. That perspective is invaluable to us right now. After a moment's consideration, Amara nodded. I'll take the position, Mr. Whitman. But I want to be clear, I won't be a token or a prop. If my input isn't taken seriously, I'll leave. Richard smiled for the first time. I wouldn't expect anything less. Amara's first week at Whitman Technologies was a sharp reminder of how different her world was from the corporate environment. Despite Richard's introduction of her as a vital consultant, most employees treated her like an errand girl. In her third development meeting, Amara finally spoke up after listening to executives debate user interface features without considering practical limitations. Excuse me, she said, raising her hand. The app requires users to upload insurance cards and ID, but many people in these communities don't have scanners or reliable internet at home. We need a solution that works with just a basic smartphone camera, even in poor lighting. James Porter, the marketing executive, barely glanced her way. We can't compromise security protocols for convenience. It's not about convenience, Amara countered. It's about accessibility. If people can't complete registration, they'll never use the services. Perhaps you should stick to taking notes, James suggested with a condescending smile. These technical aspects are quite complex. Richard, who had been observing from the corner, frowned but said nothing, leaving Amara to defend herself. After the meeting, she overheard two employees by the water cooler. Another diversity hire, one muttered. Whitman's probably trying to check boxes for that Westbrook grant. At least he put her in development and not customer-facing roles, the other replied with a chuckle. Can you imagine? Amara clutched her notebook tighter and walked past with her head held high, though the words stung. But she wouldn't quit. Her family needed this opportunity too much. That night, Amara returned home to find her mother, Denise, slumped at the kitchen table, bills spread before her. Mom, are you okay? Denise looked up, fatigue etched in the lines around her eyes. Just a long day, baby. How was the new job? It's challenging, Amara admitted, setting down her backpack. But the pay will help us catch up on bills. Denise forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's good. Really good. Amara noticed her mother's hand trembling as she sorted papers. Did you take your medication today? I'm stretching them out a bit, Denise admitted reluctantly. Just until payday. Alarm shot through Amara. Mom, you can't skip doses. That's dangerous. The prescription costs $200, Amara. The electric company is threatening to shut us off, and rent is already 2 weeks late. Amara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Despite working both jobs, they were still drowning. I get my first paycheck from Whitman next week. We'll make it work. But as she helped her mother to bed later that night, Amara couldn't shake her worry. The pressure to succeed at Whitman Technologies wasn't just about her future anymore. It was about their immediate survival. The next morning, Richard found Amara in the break room, reviewing user feedback reports during her lunch break, while the other interns chatted at another table. You're not obligated to work through lunch, he noted, pouring himself coffee. I know, she replied, not looking up. But I had some ideas about the medication reminder function that might address the concerns in these reports. Richard studied her for a moment. There were shadows under her eyes, and her uniform looked more wrinkled than usual. "Everything okay?" Amara hesitated, pride warring with honesty. "It's fine. Just some family stuff." Before Richard could probe further, James Porter entered. "Richard, the Westbrook team has moved up their visit. They'll be here next Monday, not Friday as planned." Richard's face paled. "That's 4 days from now. We're nowhere near ready." "The interface redesign still hasn't addressed the engagement issues," James confirmed grimly. "The development team says they need at least 2 more weeks." "We don't have 2 weeks," Richard snapped. "If we don't impress Westbrook, we lose everything." As the executives left to handle the crisis, Amara stared at her notes, her mind racing with possibilities. This might be her only chance to prove her value, not just to save her job, but to secure her family's future. That night, instead of going home, she stayed at the office until dawn, fueled by determination and desperation. By morning, she had completely reimagined the app's approach, drawing from her own family's healthcare struggles to create something truly accessible. Now she just needed someone to listen. Monday morning arrived with a storm of activity at Whitman Technologies. The Westbrook Foundation representatives were due in 2 hours, and panic permeated every floor. In the main conference room, the executive team ran through their presentation one last time. "This isn't working," Richard said, rubbing his temples. "The redesign still feels disconnected from the people we're trying to help." James Porter shrugged helplessly. "It's the best we could do on such short notice. Maybe we should focus on the technical specs instead of user engagement." Richard shook his head. "Westbrook cares about impact, not specifications. Without demonstrating real community engagement, we're dead in the water." A knock at the door interrupted them. Amara stood in the doorway, holding a flash drive, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. "Mr. Whitman, I have something you might want to see before the meeting." James stepped forward. "We don't have time for intern input right now." "Let her speak," Richard countered, gesturing Amara forward. "What do you have?" Amara connected her flash drive to the presentation system. "I redesigned the app interface based on actual community needs. I stayed all night to finish it." The screen displayed a completely different approach to the healthcare application. Simpler, more intuitive, with features that addressed practical issues Richard's team had never considered. The original design required high-speed internet and technical knowledge, Amara explained, navigating through her prototype. "This version works on older phones, uses minimal data, and includes features like voice command for users with literacy barriers." She clicked to a new screen. "I added a medication cost comparison tool that shows generic alternatives and local discount programs. And this emergency locator doesn't just show the nearest hospital. It shows community clinics and sliding scale providers for uninsured patients." The room fell silent as executives exchanged glances. "How did you develop this overnight?" Richard asked, amazed. "Because I live it," Amara said simply. "My mother rations her heart medication because we can't afford the full prescription. We've been to the ER 3 times this year because she couldn't get to a doctor during regular hours due to work. These aren't abstract problems for families like mine." Richard studied the prototype, then checked his watch. "The Westbrook team will be here in 90 minutes. Can you present this to them?" James started to object, but Richard silenced him with a raised hand. "Yes," Amara said, straightening her posture. "I can present it." "Then get ready," Richard decided. "You're our best shot." 2 hours later, Richard watched in awe as Amara concluded her presentation to the Westbrook Foundation evaluation team. The 5 evaluators, who had been skeptical and reserved at the start, were now engaged and asking detailed questions about implementation. "What impressed us most," said Dr. Eleanor Matthews, head of the Westbrook Healthcare Initiative, "is how this application addresses barriers we see in our own community outreach work. This is the first proposal we've reviewed that genuinely understands the practical challenges faced by underserved populations. The medication reminder with dosage tracking would be a game changer for our patient compliance issues," added another evaluator, a physician from a community health center. "Ms. Johnson," Dr. Matthews continued, "your approach demonstrates exactly the kind of innovative thinking the Westbrook Foundation seeks to support." "Mr. Whitman, We'll need some time to deliberate, but I think it's fair to say we're very impressed with your team's understanding of the issues. After the Westbrook team departed for their deliberation lunch, the conference room erupted in celebration. Executives who had dismissed Amara days earlier now crowded around to congratulate her. James Porter stood awkwardly to the side, clearly stunned by the turn of events. Richard watched it all with a mixture of pride and discomfort. The solution had been right in front of them all along, but they had been too wrapped up in their privileged perspectives to see it. As the excitement died down and staff dispersed to await the foundation's decision, Richard noticed Amara slip away. Following her, he found her in a small break room, head down on the table, fast asleep from exhaustion. He was about to wake her when he noticed her phone screen lighting up with text messages. Final notice: electricity will be disconnected tomorrow unless payment received. Mom, don't worry about me, honey. The doctor says I just need rest. Focus on your job. Landlord, if rent not received by Friday, eviction proceedings will begin. Richard felt a wave of shame wash over him. While he'd been impressed by Amara's intelligence and work ethic, he'd been completely blind to her struggles. Here was a brilliant young woman working through the night to save his multi-million-dollar company, while her own family faced eviction and her mother's health deteriorated. Stepping out quietly, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. When Amara woke an hour later, she found Richard sitting across from her at the break room table. "I'm so sorry," she said, mortified. "I just closed my eyes for a minute." "You've been here for 36 hours straight," Richard interrupted gently. "You earned that rest. And more importantly, you saved this project." He slid an envelope across the table. "Westbrook just called. They're committing $75 million to fund full development and implementation. That's 50% more than we requested." Amara's eyes widened. "That's amazing." "Yes, it is. And it's all because of you." He pushed the envelope closer. "This is for you. An advance on your new salary." "New salary?" "I'm creating a position for you, Community Engagement Director. It comes with a full-time salary of $90,000 annually, with flexible hours to accommodate your school schedule." Amara stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Whitman, There's more," he continued. "I saw the texts on your phone." When she looked alarmed, he added quickly, "Not intentionally. They popped up while you were asleep. I know about your mother's health issues and your housing situation." Amara's face flushed with embarrassment. "That's not your concern." "Actually, it is," Richard said, surprising her. "Because I know what it's like." He pulled out his wallet, the same wallet she'd returned days ago, and extracted a worn photograph. "This is me, 25 years ago. My real name is Ricardo Vasquez." The photo showed a much younger version of Richard with darker skin and black hair, standing beside an older couple in cleaning uniforms. "My parents were janitors at tech firms in Silicon Valley," he continued. "Immigrants from Mexico who worked themselves to the bone so I could go to college. But when I graduated, no one would hire Ricardo Vasquez for management positions despite my qualifications." He ran a hand through his now lightened hair. "So I became Richard Whitman. I whitewashed my identity, hired a speech coach to eliminate my accent, and suddenly doors opened. I told myself it was just business, that I'd help my community once I made it." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "But somewhere along the way, I became the very type of person who once judged me. I surrounded myself with people who looked and thought like my new identity, not my real one. Until a young woman returned my wallet and reminded me of who I really am and where I came from." Amara sat in stunned silence. "Your mother needs proper medical care," Richard continued. "There's a position opening in our HR department that would be perfect for her, full benefits, including comprehensive health insurance, starting immediately. And I've taken care of your housing situation." "What does that mean?" "It means the rent is paid, including the back rent. And I've arranged for a mortgage assistance program through the Whitman Foundation that will help your mother purchase the apartment." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "Why would you do all this?" "Because returning that wallet wasn't just about honesty," Richard said. "It was about dignity and integrity, qualities I'd forgotten while climbing the ladder. You reminded me of who I used to be and showed me how far I'd strayed from my own values." He stood, straightening his suit. The Westbrook team also mentioned they have a scholarship program for promising students interested in healthcare careers. They specifically asked about you. Seems you impressed them as much as you impressed me. As Richard turned to leave, Amara called after him. What happens now? He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Now we build something that actually helps people. Together. 1 month later, Richard stood at the back of the auditorium as Amara received first prize at the regional science competition for her project on healthcare accessibility in underserved communities. He watched with pride as she explained to judges how her experience working with a major tech company had influenced her research, never mentioning that her ideas had secured a multi-million-dollar grant and completely redirected the company's approach. In the audience sat Denise Johnson, healthy color in her cheeks for the first time in years, watching her daughter shine. Beside her sat several Whitman Technologies executives, including James Porter, who had undergone his own transformation after witnessing Amara's success. As Richard observed the scene, he fingered the worn photograph in his pocket. His parents in their cleaning uniforms, their dignity and determination evident despite their circumstances. For the first time in decades, he felt they would be proud of the man he had become, not because of his wealth or his company's success, but because he had finally remembered the most important lesson they had taught him, that a person's true value has nothing to do with their appearance or circumstances, and everything to do with their character. And it had taken a 16-year-old girl returning a lost wallet to remind him of that essential truth. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Have you or someone you know ever been underestimated because of your race? Drop a comment below and let us know your story. Subscribe for more powerful stories of triumph over prejudice, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. A new story of justice served drops every day.